What's up, guys? Welcome back to WRX Garage. This week, I am working on a couple different projects, kind of all at the same time. Unfortunately, one of them is a secret that I can't really tell you guys about just yet, but both of these are going to be great improvements for the car, specifically when going on track. So the one that I can tell you guys about is something that I've been working on and wanting to do for a while, and it is the installing a oil pressure gauge. So I have one right here in front of me, but before I tell you guys about which one I got, what parts you need, all of that, let's take a second and talk about why you even want one. So when we talk about oil pressure gauges, when we talk about oil pressure in general, obviously maintaining good oil pressure in your car is absolutely pivotal for keeping your engine healthy. You can do that by making sure that your oil pump is in working good order, that you have no leaks, no places where the oil pressure is going to be lost, and then also running good quality oil. Like this. We're gonna talk about that a little bit later. But, the biggest issue with oil pressure gauges, or oil pressure in general on cars, is that the stock oil pressure gauge, or the oil pressure sensor, is that it's not a gauge, it's a sensor. So the kit I have here has a new sensor that's going to be going in line with the OEM one. The biggest difference is that there's an actual analog readout coming from this oil pressure gauge, or this oil pressure sensor. On most cars, and not all, but most cars, and specifically talking about Subarus, the oil pressure sensor on your car is not going to tell the engine ECM or the ECU or anything like that. It's not going to tell the electronics or your dash how much oil pressure you have. The only thing it's there to do is it's binary, it's 1 or 0. It's, does the car have oil pressure? Yes. Then we don't put the oil pressure light up on the dash. If you have no oil pressure, the light comes on. So I think there might be some kind of threshold where the light comes on, where it's like if you have very, very low oil pressure, it might come on. But either way, if you have very low oil pressure, and you're out driving, if you're on track and that light comes on, your car is probably already toast. If you're pushing the car, or even if you're just driving on the highway and your oil pressure light comes on, you need to stop immediately. So, specifically talking about going on track, this oil pressure gauge I have here is going to be kind of two-part. One, it's going to help me manage and keep an eye on things and make sure that I maintain oil pressure the entire time, which is super important. But also, it has a function that it'll actually warn me. It'll flash red light really bright, and I think it might actually beep at you if it drops below a specific threshold. So if normal operating oil pressure is between 40 and 60, if I set it to give me a warning, if it goes below 40, I can back off immediately before I lose all oil pressure and I lose the block. So that's the biggest reason for getting an oil pressure gauge. So let me show you guys the actual kit. So I have the AEM X series oil pressure gauge, and like I said, it has a lot of functionality that's going to be great. It has a little digital readout as well to show a raw number, so while I'm driving on the track I can look and glance at it and see the raw number really easily. It comes with its own wiring loom, and then here are all the different parts. So it came with its own wiring loom and then the actual threaded sensor that can go straight into your block. I do want to retain the OEM functionality, so I did buy a couple of aftermarket little parts here that I'll show you in just a second. And then for those of you wondering, this is the SMY gauge pod, defroster gauge pod. I have it already mounted in here because for the life of me, I could not figure out how to mount this using this little hardware piece that goes on the back that's supposed to be able to clip in there. SMY makes a little $20 plastic piece that's specifically for the AEM gauges, and I did not know about it until I've already done all of this work. So mine might be a little bit janky, but for you guys, I want to put all those part numbers down in the description so you know about those. But essentially what I did was I used a little metal bracket to extend the back of the little screw plates that are on the back of the gauge, and then I just put a zip tie temporarily through the back to hold it in place. So this did not come like this. I did all this a couple days ago because I wanted to get it sorted out before I did the install. But there were a couple other funky little things, and that's where these two pieces come in. So like I said, the OEM sensor, we have to retain it, otherwise the car's management system won't know whether or not it has oil, so I might put it in limp mode. So we want to run these two in series using this. This is the Killer B dual port oil splitter, basically. So the oil stock OEM oil sensor will come out of the screw hole. This will go in, and then we're going to put our sensor on one side and the OEM one on the other. The other little complicated piece was that the NPT threads on this one, which is the one that came in the OEM kit, are not the same size as the Killer B one. So I had to get another little adapter screw, which will go right in between as like a little spacer. So that was a little annoying, but I got it figured out. Again, I'm gonna put both of these pieces and everything else in the description so you guys have one-stop shop for everything you need. On top of that, we have a little bit of wiring to do. And whenever I do wiring, I always want to make sure that I am doing it, to the best of my ability. I am very scared of wiring. I'm not a huge fan of it. So I always want to make sure that everything I do is pretty permanent and done correctly. So let me show you what some of the other little bits I have here. So we're going to be using an addifuse. I just bought an addifuse of various sizes, kit off Amazon. Again, link will be down there. I have a little ring terminal for grounding off one of the, I think it's the little black cable here. And then a couple other little things. We got a bunch of different fuses. We need a 5 amp fuse for this kit, which is, I already pulled one out, one little 5 amp. We have some heat shrink tubing of various sizes to make sure everything looks good. And then these are the real killers. These are going to make everything super secure if I actually get it open. I discovered these a while back when I was doing my speaker wiring and head unit stuff. These are amazing. So usually you have little butt crimp connectors. See if I can get this in focus. Where you crimp on both sides, and you can't really see the crimp because they look like this. They look like this. But with these, and again, this isn't me getting sponsored or anything, these are amazing because they will completely shrink down to size when you heat them. And this little metal piece in the middle is actually solder material. So when you heat the tubing, the solder will melt, and then it'll harden again once it cools to create like a watertight connection, and it will actually help join the two wires together. So I'm going to be cutting off this piece and putting this one on, or one of the other sizes, and using that, putting some heat shrink tubing over it, because again, we want to make sure everything stays super, super nice and solid. I'm also going to be using this high temperature thread sealant for all of these screw and fittings, because they are in a location where it is very, very high temperature. So we want to make sure all of our fittings are super solid and not spraying oil everywhere. So I'm going to be using this on the threads going into the block, and then the two sides for the adapter for this, and then onto the threads of here. I'm also going to be using this for our other project, which you guys, I can't really tell you about quite yet, but you will hear about it pretty soon. So let's get everything going. First step in doing this entire project is going to be raising the car up, draining the oil out, and then so that way when we go to install this and pull the sensor off the block, there's not oil pouring out all over everywhere. So let's get the oil drained. I'm not really going to show you guys that. I'm just going to check back in because you guys have seen me do an oil change a million times. So yeah. So the oil is drained. I put these caps back on because we're going to be working around in here. I don't want any kind of debris falling in there. But we're gonna be starting right here. So right where my finger's pointing is the OEM oil pressure sensor. So we're gonna be pulling that off by, there's this little rubber boot here that we've already taken off. Just use a little pry tool, and then we just have a little bolt that we can unscrew and then pull this out, I believe. So here is the OEM sensor. Of course, I'm going to go through and clean this as much as I can. And then let's start getting well, I'm gonna clean that threading out and then put the new dual sender from Killer Bee in that same spot. All right, guys, so after a little bit of fiddling, I managed to get everything sorted out. I was a little confused by NPT versus PT, and the fact that the OEM sensor is NPT, but the hole is PT, a little confusing. But I used some thread sealant, the dual sender adapter from Killer Bee threaded straight into the block. I have a little PT to NPT adapter right here, this little brass piece, and then here's the OEM sensor. This hole up here is going to be for where the new AEM sensor comes in right here. So I'm just waiting on one of these little adapters, not a second one, to come in the mail, and that way I can run that. Should be able to connect right here, straight out with plenty of clearance, and then we'll get into the wiring aspect. So we have the Killer Bee dual sender adapter straight into the block, and then we have our OEM sensor right here with the rubber covering that was adapted using a little brass piece, and then I adapted the actual AEM sensor right here with the exposed plug, and I should be able to pretty easily wire the plug from here, maybe connect it here, and then go all the way around and into the cabin. So I did use the thread sealant on everything, and hopefully this should be pretty good to go. Now to the hardest part, which is wiring. Another quick update, guys. We got the cable routed here. I did add some heat shrink here just to protect it, and it'll go right there. I have it routed along underneath where some of the other wires here are. And then I actually found a spot in the firewall where the foam insulation was actually coming up a little bit. So I'm gonna put some rubber, like a little rubber dowel in there to protect that wire, but it is going right through next to the brake master cylinder there, or right above the clutch slave, I believe it's called. So this little port right here. So underneath, all the way through, and then I have my 3 wires I need to work on here. Gauge pod, I need to do some stuff to make this fit in here, but it should pop in right in the fogger spot there. So. There we go. Now it's in focus. All right, so melted solder in the middle, watertight connection, super, super secure. So that's awesome. So here's the Adafuse. You'll see that there's a blue 15 amp. From all of the things I've learned from Adafuses, just doing research in general, you always want to use a circuit that is a higher power than the thing you want to use. So basically ample power. So basically this 15 amp fuse is from my seat heater, which has a toggle switch, and it only works when the car is on. So that's perfect. So we know that this fuse is not live when the car is off. So it's not going to drain the battery. And then also we're only pulling 5 amps, and even though it's only 5 amps, we don't want to disrupt anything else going on in the car. So I figure I very, very rarely use my seat heaters, so that is the perfect slot for this. So let's get it going, let's get it plugged in. It's very dark in here, and there's my fuse box. I'll show you guys how I finish the rest of the cabling. So I know it's been a little bit hectic because I've just kind of been running around. I've split this into multiple days because I've not had the right parts and things like that. But everything is wired up how it should be. I have a giant sign on my steering wheel that says do not turn on because I have not yet filled my oil back up. So I have the fittings up front, which is the dual sender from Killer Bee, and then that's directly into the block, and then in both of the 2 ports I have the OEM sensor and the AEM sensor. And all of those fittings are now curing. They have the Permatex brand high temp sealant on all the threads, so I'm not gonna be adding any oil. I'm gonna let it all cure overnight. I'm gonna come back tomorrow, add some oil, and then figure out the rest of the wiring here and make sure that the gauge, the gauge is on. Does it turn off when I shut the door? So here is the little diagram for our fuse box, if it will come into focus. There we go. So I ended up switching it from the seat heater to the audio / nav for the 10 amp right here. When I plugged it in, it did not turn on, which is awesome, but it should, there we go. It should turn on when I put the keys in now. And remember, Kevin, I'm not turning the car on because there's no oil. Yeah, there's the power. Nice, so that's just even accessory mode it turns on. That's sick. Okay, cool. So I'm probably going to button all of this back up tomorrow, get all the wires routed the way I want them, you know, zip tie them up so they're up out of the way, fill it back with oil tomorrow, and then I will show you guys the final product and how it works. It is the next day. All of our sealant has cured, which means it is time to add our oil and finally test the system here. So I am going with a new oil this time. This is Motool's 300V 5W40. I had 5W40 in the past, but this is really meant for a little bit more aggressive driving. So let's see how this goes. So we're getting sense. Don't know what that means. Let me go look at the manual. Car is idling. I finally got everything sorted out. Essentially that sense, the bad sensor error code was basically just a bad ground. I ended up doing a self tapper onto the frame just to make a super solid connection. But I think everything is working now. It is brand new oil and it is cold, so that's why it's reading a little high. From what I've researched online, your normal idle temp will be anywhere between 15 to 30 PSI at temperature. So we're still at 178. So as the oil temperature has been rising as the car warms up, this number has been going down, which is good. And see, when I blip the throttle, the oil pressure goes up. So, seems like everything is working just fine. You know what, let's just go ahead and set it to 30. 32, and let's see what happens. Oh, nice, so it starts flashing. Okay, that's actually a really good warning. So that's gonna be really easy for me to identify when I'm sitting here. As you can see, like when I'm sitting here, this is my view. It's gonna be hard to miss something flashing at you like this. So, yeah, awesome. So let me get everything cleaned up here. I'm sorry this video has kind of been all over the place because it's spanned a couple days. It's been a little difficult, but yeah, let's get everything cleaned up. I'm gonna go for a ride and just talk to you guys about my impressions. So we're sitting in the car. I just drove around for a little bit just to make sure that there wasn't any issues. It looks like my the actual gauge is reading accurately, fluctuating anywhere between 20, 22 right now at idle. We're at 198 oil temperature. You guys can see that. So at idle here, 22, which is great, and the highest I saw when getting into a little bit of boost was like around 70, 80. So I do know that these FA20s run pretty high oil pressures. When you're running flat out, you know, you're probably gonna get around 100 PSI, but that would really be, you know, once the car is fully warmed up and you're at a higher oil temperature, because we're still at, you know, 198, which is fine. But you know, 210, 215 oil temps, that's really when these pressures will start getting a little bit lower, which is great. Overall, very happy. This is going to be something that is very, very valuable when I'm on track. I can keep an eye on the pressure, and I'll have that flashing warning function in case I lose oil pressure. I can get the car turned off and coast, get towed off the track, and hopefully save the block. So. Just went and got groceries. I checked under the car, I checked the engine bay, and everything is running just fine. This is turning on perfectly as soon as I turn the ignition on, which is amazing. So everything has worked out perfectly. While I'm in the car, just a quick reminder, if you guys haven't seen the video about the Dark Matter X shifter, I finally dialed in more adjustments on this, and it is absolutely freaking amazing. So if you guys haven't seen the video of this installation, make sure you go check that out. I'll put that probably up in the corner. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you made it this far, thank you so much. We really appreciate all your feedback. We're gonna keep pushing forward to make more and more videos, specifically for things that are going to help this car perform on track. We're gonna be doing a couple little things here and there with the truck coming up soon. We'll see about that, but next track day is in, I think, 3 weeks from now. So definitely getting excited. I'm happy I have this pressure gauge. I've been meaning to do this for a long time, but as always, all the parts that you need for this, the tools, all the little electrical connectors, I'm gonna put down in the description. So thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week. Peace.